you tried to explain to an alien why the Football Manager series is so gargantuanly popular, they'd probably send you for further testing. Combining the thrills and spills of a European final with the drudge and tedium of managing accounting spreadsheets, it doesn't make any sense. And yet somehow the Football Manager series has become a part of the wider footballing culture, like pre-match pints, comedy chants, and complaining about VAR when they miss a goal that was clearly onside because of sheer incompetence, and it's not like other mistakes, it's an objective fact, not a subjective decision. Sorry, where was I? Oh yeah, Football Manager. Apparently the 24 edition will be the last of its generation, before a huge revamp for next year. So, what better time to take a look at the history of football management video games? The good, the bad, and the downright ridiculous. That's right, we did it with regular football games over there. Now, we're doing it with Football Manager. It's gonna get weird. We did this last time! Quiz time. What was the first ever football management video game? Yes, well done. It was Football Manager. Released in 1982 for the ZX Spectrum, here's a taste of the phenomenal matchday experience that you could enjoy. Okay, I'm being harsh. Sure, by today's standards, you could play a better looking game on your toaster, but back then, it was a huge success. It was ported to basically every type of machine you could find, and won several awards. Though laughably, they were in Best Strategy Game. Yeah, there were different times. It also sold over 500,000 copies, a remarkable number for a game of that era. You can still buy it today as well, as the original creator, Kevin Toms, dug out the old code and ported it to iOS, Android, and even Amazon Fire Sticks. This was the first in a trio of Football Manager titles to be released in the 1980s and early 90s, and all of them were well received. But success breeds imitation, and with such excellent names as Champions, Football Fever, Soccer Supremo, and my personal favourite, The Boss. But there was one game in particular that would stand above these and so many other games. Championship Manager. The most realistic football management simulation ever, went the tagline to the 1992 game, developed by brothers Paul and Oliver Collier from their bedroom in the leafy county of Shropshire. But despite the confident marketing, the first Championship Manager was something of a flop. Critics lamented the match engine compared to its peers and the complete lack of any sound whatsoever. But that didn't deter the brothers, who kept beavering away with their franchise, developing and updating it with new and exciting features every year. Concurrently running leagues, a real-time save editor, even match commentary from the legendary Clive Tildesley. It was woeful, but still.
Shot nicely into the danger area, and he rifles in the shot. Should have at least made the keeper make a save.
The improvements and features kept getting added release by release. And after a few games, the most realistic football management simulation ever was finally living up to the tagline. It was the best-selling PC game in the UK in the late 90s. That's right, not just sports games, but all games. The massive, weird and wild games of the 80s were a distant memory, as Championship Manager swept aside its competitors. The Collier brothers' creation maintained its supremacy into the 2000s, and ask anyone of a certain vintage, and there's one football management video game that stands out above the rest. Championship Manager 0102 is nothing short of an institution. Whether it be signing wonder kids Maxim to Schalke, Cherno Samba and Taribo West to create your world-beating team for the next decade, or simply staring at the last 5 minutes possession meter going from side to side during a match, fans of the series will tell you 0102 is the definitive football management experience. You may look at its complete lack of match engine, rudimentary systems, and feature list that makes it feel primitive compared to the Football Manager of today, but it was that very simplicity that made it so appealing. Sports Interactive got the balance exactly right with 0102, with just enough strategy to challenge even the better players, but accessible enough for newcomers. The blocky coloured visuals made everything clear to understand, and lent a sense of fun and playfulness to what was, by definition, a fairly sterile genre. You could also play through an entire season in an afternoon, as opposed to the months-long investment you need in today's Football Manager games. It was perfectly digestible, supremely balanced, and extremely fun. So much so, people are still updating the game today. If you have an old copy lying around, you can install it, find a patch, and add every league, team and player from the current squads around the world, and play out your football fantasies on a 20-year-old game. But with the series peaking in 0102, the only way was down for Championship Manager. Its sequel, Championship Manager 4, was revolutionary in some respects. It introduced a top-down match engine for the first time. They rebuilt the entire code base after a decade of repurposing the same old, tired one. But the weight of expectation and increased investment to the project meant the developers felt they needed to add more features to simulate real football more accurately. That pressure led to overreaching ambition and burnout. And behind the scenes, the relationship between Sports Interactive and publisher Eidos was breaking down. Eidos demanded the game come out in a year, but Sports Interactive knew it wasn't ready. The result was a buggy, unfinished fiasco. In 2004, the relationship ended, and Sports Interactive moved on from Eidos. From here, the Football Manager series was born. The developers had learned from their past mistakes and wanted to build a new franchise that would do things the right way, in their own time and on their own terms. Football Manager was by quite some distance the most in-depth and intelligent football management simulation ever made. The code base was rebuilt from the ground up, the match engine tighter and more dynamic, and the whole experience felt like a modern version of the GOAT, Championship Manager 0102. It was the game that established the franchise as the future of football management games. Championship Manager, meanwhile, would fall from grace as rapidly as a number of former players I can't name for legal reasons. The game was doomed from the start. Eidos had to essentially rebuild the entire game in-house, but without the expertise of the Collier brothers and co. The game released with a litany of technical issues, despite a series of delays pushing it back a year. The game also suffered from poor AI, unrealistic behaviours, and a general lack of polish compared to Sports Interactive's new title. Championship Manager lost the first battle, and it would go on to lose the war. It bowed out of the fight for good in 2011, allowing Football Manager to stand uncontested as the definitive management series. So, that's the two great titans of the football management game out the way. But what about the others? Both Championship Manager and Football Manager were PC exclusive, or certainly PC focused. But what did the console crowd have to play instead? Well, the top dog was LMA Manager. The first title released in 1999, and over an 8-year span it was the go-to for console players. Whilst not having the details and depth of the PC games, LMA Manager stood out with one key feature: a fully 3D match engine. Okay, by today's standards it's not the prettiest thing, but bear in mind Football Manager still doesn't have a fully 3D match engine, and LMA was doing it in 1999. What it lacked in features, it made up for in personality. The focus was on visual flair. The menus, the UI, the graphics, they all look great. It also attempted to emulate real-world stadiums from some of Europe's biggest leagues, as well as improve the visuals on players, kits and clubs to make them more realistic. LMA Manager never had the chance to reach the tactical depth of its PC counterparts. The hardware for the time just couldn't keep up. But for console gamers, it was arguably as close as they were ever going to get. But it wasn't the only option. During the heyday of the rivalry between FIFA and Pro Evolution Soccer for football game supremacy, both franchises attempted standalone management games of their own. In fact, EA were making football management simulations from as far back as 1997 with FIFA Soccer Manager, which had some fun features like the ability to build your own stadium. But it was also confusing and had baffling menu systems that made no sense at all. This was followed by several other series, including the FA Premier League Football Manager and Total Club Manager. But it's probably the FIFA Manager series that's most fondly remembered. It used the same engine as the normal FIFA games, which allowed for some of the most impressive matchday graphics around. Still better than what we get in modern FM games. EA's take on football management games ran all the way up to 2014, before becoming more and more heavily integrated into the traditional football game, to the point where it was basically made redundant, as many of the systems were brought into FIFA's single-player career mode. At the same time, Pro Evolution Soccer, desperate to get the one-up on its rival, also created a football management game. Appropriately titled Pro Evolution Soccer Management, it was a massive downgrade on its FIFA rival. Despite having the superior game engine, it lacked depth, strategy, and even some of the fundamentals of the sport, like relegation. It's no wonder they never made a sequel. Yep, FIFA won out in that battle too. So, PC gamers had the pinnacle of the genre, and console gamers had some pretty good, and some not so good alternatives. But I did say before that this was going to get weird. The history of football management games goes a lot further than just a few franchises. Nowadays, we don't really get titles outside of Football Manager. But there was a time when there were loads of them. There were the generic titles with players and managers attached to them. Some of these were fairly rote, like Kevin Keegan's Player Manager or Kenny Dalglish's Soccer Manager. They were pretty basic, with dumbed-down features and some uncanny player likenesses. Kevin Keegan in particular still haunts my nightmares. Then there's O'Leary Manager 2000. I'm not sure what's worse: the fact they thought former Leeds manager David O'Leary would help sell it, the fact it was exclusive to the Game Boy Color, or the fact they had the temerity to stick a year on the end, as if this would ever become an annual series. To be fair, the game was actually pretty good. But we never got O'Leary Manager 2001. Says it all, really. Then there's the absolutely baffling Ali McCoy's director of football. I mean, where do I even begin? Less a game about managing a football team, more a simulation of running a football business. The game stars the titular McCoist a whole 10 years before he'd go anywhere near football management. He probably regrets it now too, considering the game gave you an actual option to dodge taxes. But some of these bizarre football management games didn't even have the luxury of a famous name to boost sales. Some of them had terrible names instead, like Let's Make a Soccer Team. This game has probably the most narrative-driven design in the history of the genre. Basically, you're an executive at your local club, and you have to stop it getting absorbed by the big, bad football conglomerate. That's right, they made a game where the suits and execs are the heroes. Dumb name, even dumber concept. There's also Lords of Football, a hybrid of Football Manager in The Sims. All the fun of implementing a 3-4-3 with a double pivot whilst trying to stop Cristiano Ronaldo weeing himself on the touchline. Did you know there's a football management MMO? Hat-Trick is a browser and mobile game first released way back in 1997 and sees you set up a team, invest in new players and staff, and then send your team out onto the pitch every week. There's no fast forwarding here though, as every literal Saturday you'll need to check in before kickoff and make sure your star striker is fit and ready to go. But I've saved the best for last. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dundee European Challenge. No, it hasn't got the legendary Sean Dundee on the cover like this game. In this title, you play as Dundee FC, and only Dundee FC, as they attempt to win the European Cup. The game actually had two versions, one featuring manager Archie Knox, the other featuring manager Jockey Scott, when Archie got sacked midway through the season. Now look, the idea of a game focused on managing one particular club isn't a bad idea, especially for a game released in 1986. Being able to guide your team to European victory is something all fans of this genre still love doing to this day. There's just one problem. Dundee hadn't been even close to European qualification in over a decade. But you know what? These games might have been weird, with strange ideas of what a football management game should be, and even more baffling gameplay and personality choices. So what? At least they were being inventive, trying new things, experimenting with an established formula. I'm really glad Football Manager is as good as it is. I've sunk thousands of hours into this series, and I'm sure I'll sink thousands more in future games as well. But where are the competitors? Where are the alternatives where I could build my own stadium, have a fierce battle against a rival club owner, and funnel my taxes into the Cayman Islands? Not that I'd ever do that, obviously. Football management video games have never been better. I just wish we could have a couple more fun and silly alternatives. Come on, Nintendo. Am I the only one who wants Mario Strikers Battle League Football Manager? Just think about it. Waluigi, the sweeper keeper. Princess Peach as the inverted winger. And the great man himself as the trequartista.